All right,
All right, so
the vCluster looks created. So let me clear it and let me do the port forward for that. And let's try it out on the browser. Localhost 8080. Whoa.
there you go, Sam. So there you go. First snapshots are Rickroll. So hopefully you enjoyed that. vCluster version 0.24 is here, and there's a couple of features that have been included with it. Today, we're going to take a look at snapshots, which are pretty exciting because it makes it a lot easier to back up your vCluster, share it, do all kinds of stuff with it. So we're going to look at a quick demo, and then I'm going to show Saiyam what I'm working on. So let's go ahead and get started. Hello, fellow developers. So we're going to go ahead and actually do a demo about snapshotting, but I'm going to get started at the very beginning, and I'm going to create an actual image. So I'm starting out with my Docker file. It's just doing something very simple. It is running Nginx, and it is exposing on port 80, and it's using this image, right? So I'm just serving this image, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a image and then push it to Docker Hub. So to do that, I'm just building it, and then I'm tagging it vs-rr 1987 and making sure that I set the platform to Linux AMD 64 because I am building this on a Mac. All right, so once it's actually built, I'm going to push it, and then what we're going to do is we're going to use this in a deployment on our virtual cluster, and then we're going to snapshot it, and we're going to share that around, right? So very simple use case where I have created an application. It is running in a virtual cluster, and then I'm going to back it up, and then I'm going to share that file, right? So we'll go ahead and get started by creating a virtual cluster. So we don't have any running yet, but we're going to go ahead and run vCluster create test, which is going to create that virtual cluster for us. And I'm going to speed it up a little bit here so that it finishes very quickly so that we can move on to the next thing. All right, so after I've created it, what I'm going to do is I need to look and make sure that I'm in the right context. So I'm going to type out kubectx, and it's going to show default in the vCluster test. So we're in the vCluster test. There is a Docker container running that is port forwarding for us. I'm going to make sure there's no CRDs on here. I'm going to show namespaces. Everything's default. Nothing's running. Like it's a very default Kubernetes deployment. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a namespace for test, and then we're going to create that deployment in test. All the files, all the information, all that stuff too is going to be in the link below in GitHub. So if you want to follow along and do it as well, you can do that. So just check the GitHub link and then head over there. All right, so now what we've done is we have seen that the pod is running, and we've gone ahead and we've done port forwarding on our local machine so that we can bring up that browser and check it out. And there it is. It's running. What a great image, right? So we're going to go ahead and share that in a few minutes with somebody and see how that works out, as you saw in the beginning of the video. All right, so we're going to go back to default with the kube context command to make sure that we're on the base cluster. And then we're going to run the vCluster snapshot command. So we're going to run vCluster snapshot test and then use OCI and specify Docker Hub. So this is where I want that snapshot to be saved. I'm going to save it in docker.io/mpedison/vcluster-test and then snapshot. And then once that's all backed up, what we can do is we can go ahead and change our context back to the virtual cluster. And we're going to do something fun here, right? Like we're going to mess around. We're going to apply Cert Manager and get that configured and installed in our vCluster because, hey, why not? I'm just going to install a bunch of CRDs, right? Like I can do that. But maybe that's a little bit too much for me. Maybe I don't really want to do that right now, and I want to go back to a state before this. So what could I do is instead of recreating the virtual cluster completely, right, like and having it come back up because maybe I put some work in and like I've got stuff configured how I want it to be. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the base cluster. So I'm going to do kubectx default. I'm going to list the virtual cluster, and then I'm going to do a restore in place. So what this is going to do is it's going to restore that virtual cluster to a point in time before I installed those CRDs and just went off the rails, crazy installing everything. So we're going to go back over to the virtual cluster. So we're going to connect to test, and then we're going to list the CRD after the vCluster comes back up after it's been restored from the snapshot. So let's go ahead and look at the CRDs again. And there we go. We're back to the state before I went crazy and installed Cert Manager and anything else that I wanted to install. All right, so now we're going back to the host cluster again, and we're going to go ahead and delete. We're going to delete that entire virtual cluster instead of restoring it. So we're deleting it, getting rid of everything. It's not there anymore. It's gone. And then after that, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create using that snapshot, right? So we're going to create test, and we're going to use the restore option, and we're going to restore from that snapshot that we created off that original virtual cluster. And here, it's just going to recreate from that exact state that we had from before. So like if I wanted to, I could create this somewhere else on a different cluster. I could give it to someone else and they could create on a different cluster just based off of that snapshot. And they can see exactly what I've created and what I've been working on. Like maybe you want to share a workload, like the workload that I'm going to share with Saiyam, and see what someone else thinks about it without having to actually, specify out a bunch of stuff. You just want to quickly share something that you're working on. Well, you can do that, right? Like you can use that snapshot. They can create their own virtual cluster off that snapshot. and then just run it and then check on what's going on within it and then run this awesome image, right? So let's go ahead and check in with Saiyam and see what he thinks of what we've been working on. All right, so I've been working on this for a little bit. Let's go ahead and bring Saiyam in and show him what I've been working on. So hey, Saiyam, let's get you added in there and show you some work. All right, so go ahead and create that vCluster.
Sure. I have that 0.24 and I already am connected to the base Kubernetes cluster. So I'll run the commands that you sent me. Let's see what happens. So vCluster create test and restore from the snapshot that you have created already.
Yep,
And
create
let's see.
snapshot, upload to the Docker Hub. Let's see how this works. I want you to see what I've been working on to make sure that all the hard work that I've been putting in is gonna pay off.
And I get to see your workloads.
Yeah. So yeah, I've got a workload that's running in this virtual cluster. I did a snapshot so that I could share it with you. It's kind of minimal, so there's not much really going on. But what it's doing now, yeah. So now what we're doing is we're restoring from the snapshot. It's going to bring up that virtual cluster. A lot of the same stuff that was created in mine is going to be there, and then more than likely even the pod name is going to be the exact same. So we should be able to just expose that, and you can bring a browser up. Yeah. So it could be a good way to share stuff that you're working on with other teams that are using vCluster. You can create a snapshot, you can back stuff up, and either restore from that or create a brand new virtual cluster out of it.
This can be the starting point, right? You can have the configuration files preloaded in a particular snapshot, like GitOps, Argo CD, or particular tooling, and then give that particular bundled vCluster to create the base cluster out of it. So I think that's pretty cool. All right,
So
the vCluster looks created. So let me clear it, and let me do the port forward for that. And let's try it out on the browser. Localhost 8080. Whoa.
there you go, Sam. So there you go. First snapshots of Rickroll. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Thank you, Saiyam, for humoring me and trying this out. All the information on how to create this stuff and everything will be in GitHub. So yeah. So here, if you want to see what I did, I've basically
right.
Yeah. So like I've got a deployment running and it's built off of it's running the image, no service or anything right now.
Okay.
We just did the port forward so you can do it. I'm making it very simple, but yeah, you could do a service, but then you have to kind of assume like what's running on their virtual cluster to see if there's ingress, and that makes it a little more complicated. But for this one, yeah, I just created a deployment based off of the image that we created earlier in the video, and then shared it over. So if you wanna rickroll somebody, I've got all that information in GitHub. But
yeah, I think that's pretty cool, Mike. Because this can be useful in so many ways, because right now my head is spinning on how many ways I can actually use this thing: backup, disaster recovery, preloaded virtual configurations, sharing something that you are working with your colleagues, so many things. And you can use the snapshot and restore functionality of vCluster. So happy that it's out, and make sure to try it out, the vCluster snapshot feature, and let us know in the comments how do you feel about it, and what use case will you feel that you would be using it.